I think we all have sensibilities. There's a soul awareness that you can unearth in the body, deep body intelligence.
Welcome to another show. We have a very interesting character with us today. It's Andrew Scheim, coming from New Mexico. He's been like a godfather to the iHeal collective and showing us new methodologies and energy medicine and all kinds of really interesting techniques. Andrew, welcome to the show. I want to ask you some questions just to get us started, because I think we're going to have to do a series of shows because there's quite a lot to go over, I'm assuming. But to kick it off, tell me a little bit about your journey into naturopathic health or holistic health, or however you consider it. When did you get started, and what drawed you into this field?
When I was born. That's not a joke either. I think we all have sensibilities, and in my experience, even working with very young children, there's a soul awareness that you can unearth in the body, deep body intelligence. So some of us, I think, hold on to that, and we're very aware of the journey early on. And then it's a question of how we translate that into our life. And, obviously, there can be a more external approach, but there has to be a soul awakening, a soul search. I think anybody in this healing path is searching. Now, the question is, we get overlays and interpretations and misinterpretations. One of the things that helped me along the way was I was deeply into music. And I think you have to find language systems that resonate with your soul. So music is a very deep language. And I kind of learned in healing almost to follow a more musical, as I got deeper and more effective in healing, what I would call the soul music language started to translate into healing.
So how long have you been a practitioner?
Well, that's a question of what the word practitioner means. If you're looking deeply and asking questions and then seeking out knowledge for a very long time, but I really actively, as far as what was quote unquote holistic medicine, obviously when you start having problems with your body, you're going to be you're asking certain questions. So that started in my 20s. I had a healthful business for years, so I was working with people indirectly a lot at the beginning with nutrition. You read books, you gather knowledge, you kind of learn a piece here, a piece there, and I learned so many pieces, I could be a jigsaw puzzle. But I did start piecing together the pieces and started gaining a hierarchical, you might say, view of the pieces, and I kind of developed it into an overview, which I teach today in terms of if somebody's sick, how do you get caught in the little fragments, or do you kind of have an overview? So, it started with nutrition, and then I got more aware of energy, and then I became more aware of trauma, which drives the energy body, and then I became more aware of the subconscious mind and that process. But along the way, it was so interesting because every piece, like particularly in my earlier days, all this research around digestive health and colon health, very, very important, the endocrine system. There's so many complexities. And when people are sick, they're kind of pecking away at different issues. But what about, is there an overview? And with people, I'll usually kind of emphasize some of the key underlying aspects that they need to look at. So if you're just into nutrition, but your body's super toxic, obviously, it's like dumping nutrients into a swamp.
Right.
And so it's fascinating, but I kind of had incremental pieces along the way. And where I land today mostly is in the subconscious arena, working at consciousness itself.
Something that I'm finding interesting is a lot of practitioners, as they they gain years and years of experience. I'm talking like multiple decades. I think there's a tendency for coming from the allopathic system where people get lost in all the complexity and the detail. Whereas as you mature as a practitioner, I'm finding there's more and more of a consensus of there's actually a simplicity to what you could call homeostasis, or the proper state of the body, and the body's ability to heal itself really just comes from, as you said, kind of like a tuning, like an instrument. And if you take care of that, the complexities will handle themselves rather than getting lost in the branches and tiny leaves of a tree. You can simply treat the soil and give the tree what
Right.
it
I mean,
needs.
here's an interesting way of looking at it. You're a musician. Any musician has very basic sensibilities about intonation. I'm a sax player.
Hmm.
If you sound like shit, nobody's going to come to your concert.
Right.
Now, somebody will know if you're a mental gyrational player, and they might like that. Oh, a bunch of notes. Somebody might like a more simplicity sound, like in jazz, they would call it the cool school. But whatever it is, being intonation, what's called the groove, is there that sense of deep movement, coordination in the rhythm section, good sound. But it's funny because we apply a lot of left brain intellectual bullshit in wellness. And we never think about like a musician. Now,
Right.
everybody thinks like a musician when they feel like shit. I don't feel good. Their instrument is out of balance.
Right.
And they know that, but then they will get interpreted. They go to a physician and they never deal with the actual direct, maybe if you go to a consciousness person, they will try to work with you at that I don't feel good level. But everybody wants to feel good. And then you got to ask yourself on the obvious level, well, what is causing you not to feel good, so to speak?
Right.
I mean, that's just such a simple place to start. But then, of course, you go to doctors and they have well, you have this itis or this, whatever. They give you a label and then they treat the label, seems kind of ludicrous.
Right.
But they never dig down into like, oh man, you got bad tone. Let's maybe you can get better intonation, so to speak. If I taught you as a sax player and you had bad tone, I'd work with you intimately with that intonation.
Well, have you ever heard of like pitch correction? So imagine you play a guitar and it's all out of tune and out of whack, and then you run it through an algorithm that corrects the pitch, and you're like, oh great, now it sounds good, but the guitar itself is still out of tune. And I kind of see that in analogous as the drug industry and pharmaceuticals, where they're just plastering on this thing when the original problem, which we're going to get into, I think, some more, really isn't and hasn't been addressed for quite a long time. And it's amazing because you go to
Exactly. That's what supposedly the label and then the correction is going to fix the problem. They're not, you like where you say, you're exactly.
Mhm.
The neck is warped, literally on people of the guitar, all that structural imbalance. I've had clients whose bones are literally like rebar, just literally twisted and turned. And why would a bone go like this? That's interesting.
Mhm.
Why would a bone get so dense and start to twist? And that speaks to the psychic environment within us all.
That's interesting. We just had another practitioner, Daniel Roytas, who, in his research, he's finding more and more that the mind is actually what creates health and creates sickness first. It's like the root. It's the root
Absolutely,
situation.
absolutely.
And I know that you've been on this path and you've been talking about this a long time with us. And I'm only just starting to understand it, because I was always very skeptical about energy medicine. As I went through the university pathway of biology, and perhaps I was indoctrinated, for lack of a better term, away from really giving the credence to this aspect of consciousness and reality.
But okay, let's be simple about it. What is the mind basically in terms of suffering? For me, there's a teaching called Ho'oponopono, and this also reminds me of Rumi. I love these. There are similar overlying quotes. Uh,
How do you say that again? Opono.
Ho'oponopono. It was developed. The modern system was a body work. A body worker named Morna Simeona developed her teachings, and the reason I gravitated towards her is because I was doing body work, and you could see the trauma loops playing literally intimately within a body. Now you say the mind, but let's be specific. If it was all just, but it's traumatic. What makes something traumatic where you're constricting and blocking and resisting? So their system is about cleaning the subconscious mind. So without trauma, there's no problem. So what makes it, that's an intriguing question. Why traumatic?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, that's like the $1 billion question, but all we know is that the body seems to have an intelligence around these very deep memory loops.
Right.
And this gets into spiritual work because I study various systems, and some people would say just ignore it, basically, dissociate with it. It's all bullshit, just exit. That's one system of teaching. Other people would, like in Ho'oponopono, they're saying, no, no, no. It's kind of musical. It's separated from the divine alignment. So if it shows up out of alignment, put it back into alignment. What body work, deep body trauma work can do is speak intimately at the musical language. What is the pure language of the soul is very simply, if you're going to describe God and simply, go musical. Now, if you're going to describe out of attunement with God, go musical. And then just simply do the work musically. Now, this is intimate, energetic. At the body work level, I will to say what I discovered, and this is very difficult to explain. We create some type of trauma loop formation where something becomes believable to the mind and it becomes fixed. If you can start to vibrate it to such a degree that it opens up sort of the space that it's trying to create, or you're trying to break bonds. And we talked about this with the mission coil. There's some
Right.
type of bond creation that we think is reality. And this is bizarre on the energetic level, but it's almost like what they call primordial, what do they call primordial attachment? And Buddhism is like, could be described in, I'm sure you've studied this in physics.
A little
Things
bit.
start to come together for no apparent reason and they create a reality. But is that divine reality? And I know this sounds nuts, but we build our reality, our thought system based on some primordial bonding or gripping or grasping and attachment the Buddhists call. They don't really get into the physics of it enough.
So when you say trauma, you're not necessarily referring to one's experience in their own life, but this could go deeper than that.
Talking about micro programming of the mind itself, yes. The mind is traumatic because of the way it acts.
So is this something that, let's say someone had a relatively normal life, but they're manifesting all this illness. Is this something that could be, inherited or picked up from an external source?
This is the beauty of the Ho'oponopono piece that I kind of clued into and other teachers, micro to macro. It's like a computer virus, and it pops maybe at 20 or 60, or it pops. Every woman gets breast cancer at 33, or all of a sudden you're going along, you drop dead. Dr. Yulin said he once cleaned a woman, and if he didn't clean her, there would be an autistic child born 4 generations down. So think of the
Whoa.
level of programming. I mean, you really have to start thinking micro. If you say the mind and you got the body, what are you backtracking to in terms of the mind? You're backtracking to some type of micro, uh, just primordial.
Like a disturbance?
Now, I mean, whatever, see, this is where it gets very interesting in all the teachings I've studied because they all get very esoteric about how you're going about this. There's something going on at the micro level. You're trying to find the language to tap that micro programming and liberate its primordial ignorance, so to speak. Now, most people would think, most people are not going to tune. First, you got to go, something's eating at you. Okay, pragmatically, if you're sick, you go external. Most people give me a label, fix this, fix that. How many people are going to go deeply internal and start observing deeply within to such a point? Okay, here's the clue that I learned in the body and body work. In Chinese medicine, if the energy is flowing along smoothly and there's no disturbance, you're healthy. But if all of a sudden you get a big grip and a grab, now you got to start. If you can perceive that, now you're asking yourself, wait a minute, what's going on here? Something at the micro level is gripping, but if you're not trained or even asking that question and giving no relevance, go external. Go. I don't care if it's allopathic or holistic. You're going to start externalizing that micro occurrence. If you pay attention to the micro, and this is Ho'oponopono teaching, if you go micro and start cleaning the subconscious mind, you will start to have way better life, physically, relationship, and every which level. So you got to get down to what the hell is this micro looping programming that keeps going generation to generation to generation.
Well, I have some inclination to believe that it's by design to keep people in this loop. A lot of this, I'm really looking into the electrostatic charge technology that you've unveiled to us, and going into some of these characters. Like, these guys were developing this stuff 200 or 125 years ago, and then it just all stopped around 1912 or something, around there. And all this stuff was just swept aside, and then it became purely pharmaceutical land. No longer, instead of trying to describe observations that just happen in nature, I believe that the controllers or the educators began trying to create an illusion that they are the system itself, in that they'll bring in all these fancy words and esoteric things, and like species, for instance, the separation of species. That's a human concept. Those are just words we made up to describe a process in reality or in nature.
One little thing I want to interject. Think about what science tried to do. The Middle Ages was usually superstitious, a lot of churchy stuff, demons, witches. Then they come along, polar opposite, left brain, we're going to study every observational.
Right.
And so nobody resolved. I mean, there were the alchemy game, which is sort of in between, is another dance, but nobody was solving the problem of consciousness, basically. Or if they were off in the Himalayas somewhere going, here and there, a human being getting it.
So,
you might call it a bipolar consciousness shift, because now it's science-based, which is like a religion, because they say we have the science, but it's also a form of superstition. Because if you peel it away and you ask them, well, what are you basing this on? It's one isolated study concluding it's isolationism, because it's left brain, basically.
Absolutely. It's similar to how psychology and neurobiology have traditionally been completely separated, and they're just the process of long-term memory, for example, is no one knows how it works. We have a little almond-sized piece of reptilian brain that keeps our short-term memory and allows us to be the squirrels and remember how to use our fingers and whatnot. but the process of long-term memory seems to be really wide open. And I know I've talked your ear off about the latest physics discoveries in vortex science and cavitation bubbles and yada yada. Something that's interesting that I found in an EEG study was that the brain actually creates standing waves, and whenever you have standing waves, you're going to have certain vortex points And when people are remembering long term, you get these little vortex dark spots of energy in the mind. And I'm proposing that your consciousness actually somewhat exists outside of the mind. And
Absolutely.
this is what they don't want us to know.
Well, I mean, okay, so let's go back to Ho'oponopono. Their model is very simple. They have a prayer. It goes, Divine Father, Mother, Son is one. Here's the kicker. Divine Father and Mother are clear of karma or any kind of trauma. The Son is the memory self. So the goal is to get the memory self back in alignment with Divine Father and Mother. So you're continually reminding the subconscious of where, of vertical alignment, so to speak, which is, honestly, this is why I go for the sound type approach, vibrational type of healing, because as soon as you're in memory, it's like a field of delusion that goes linear, and it creates time, it creates space, it's constant, endless loops. As soon as you go vertical, it just purifies all that and brings it back to the now. So you're trying to continually remind, this thought-based mind, which has created this thought-based world, which goes, spiritually, essentially creates a lot of damage. You're trying to find that simple presence, consciousness, and keep bringing it back to what a lot of people would say, the presence or the now. Mm-hmm. So that's, the mystery of thought itself. All this trouble begins with thought.
Again, we're seeing this over and over with placebo studies, where you have people taking saline shots, and they say, "Oh, we just injected you with the flu," and the people develop the symptoms, and it works both ways. There's literally there's no virus going on at all. There's even the existence of, my personal research is starting to cast doubt on a lot of these things even existing at all. And really it's just their vibrations and again, tying it back into the physics models that are starting to be discovered, convergently evolving around the world. Multiple people are figuring this out at the same time, because these are observable things in nature. Light, vibration, sound, and matter are not separate. And so, the analogy of coming from it as a musician actually is starting to look like it's the most accurate form of holistic practice in terms of a physics, which is ultimately the search for the truth. It looks like it's the best way forward. And
here's the rub I find. Pragmatically speaking, you have to break your habit. All this Western science, everyone's in the habit of the mind, so to speak. So what does that look like psychologically if you're going to say, wait a minute, I've been betting on the wrong horse? And in a sense, even for me, and I'm 70 years old, I kind of woke up to let go, this letting go thing. In other words, what are you letting go to? You're letting go, it doesn't matter. We've constructed ourselves based on false frequency, you might say. Because and this is just human, if you want to get along with somebody in your family and they're crazy and chaotic, you're going to kind of have to become crazy and chaotic.
It's kind of like if you match the wavelength so it cancels out, like an XY microphone.
Right. You're playing with you're not wise. You're not enlightened at that. You're trying to survive. So fear, obviously, and frequency. In Chinese medicine, the primordial, this is interesting. We've been talking about this mission coil.
Yeah.
First, you treat the kidneys, which in Chinese medicine is fear. So fear is obviously a huge factor amongst us humans. And, you're trying to survive, obviously. You can't fall.
Can I hold that thought there? Can we define the importance of the kidney? Because I think a lot of listeners really don't know anything, and we're getting very esoteric here, but like the importance of the kidney, yes, based on it is a fear organ, or could you dive into that a little bit, and a little bit of
Sure.
biological like what is the function of the kidney in the body?
Well, first of all, mission system, you treat the kidneys first physically because it's the number one organ of elimination. So if the kidney isn't cleansing, if you're dumping toxins out of the body, the kidneys are a filter, they have to work properly.
So the kidneys are the
Secondly is the
filter. They're
liver.
the kidneys and the liver are the filtration.
In the whole digestive system, you got food, you break it down with the spleen, stomach, pancreas, then it goes to the small intestine. I mean, all Chinese medicine is based on these organ systems, which all contribute to digestion, breaking down nutrients. But then there's that underlying emotional piece they have. So a lot of people who are sick are very toxic. Now, pragmatically speaking, their colons don't work very well at all. So they're not mulching their food. The colon's like a septic tank.
Right.
If you have a great septic tank, the people that I know that have beautiful septic tank environment are very healthy, no matter what they eat. They're just healthy. If you can get it nip it in the bud, that's great. But what happens is normally there's byproduct, and then everything's trying to process toxins, the kidneys, the liver, different stages of digestion. But ultimately, if the body becomes toxic, you got a real problem. But the kidneys are in a mission. You're trying to heal toxicity, so you prepare the kidneys for the dump. You're going to start detoxing the body. So you prepare the kidneys, get them operational again. Now, emotionally in Chinese medicine, and this is huge, and everybody, even Western medicine, kidneys, adrenals are like you have adrenal collapse, you're exhausted. It's the primary battery pack in Chinese medicine. If your kidney qi is strong at birth, that means you got a lot of energy. People seem very bullish and full of energy. They're just born with lots of vital, what they call congenital qi, meaning core energy. If you're very delicate, you're born with weak congenital qi. But the kidney also has to do with that vital energy, life force, and also it's fear. So I like the Chinese model because you can now pragmatically approach yourself. Regardless of all this consciousness talk, you can now, if you've got a lot of fear, treat the kidneys, treat the kidney meridian, treat all the strings of the 12-string guitar, listen to the energy. If you got grief, work on the colon, lung. So there's always this interesting, at least it clues you in, and you can actually tune in through the Chinese pulses and go, I'm thinking a lot. My spleen, stomach, pancreas, meridian is imbalanced. So that at least you're getting clued in. So it's
that's like the first
tuning. It's like tuning this musical instrument. You're literally trying to tune up. Let's say you tweak the kidney string too tight on the guitar, it's about to pop. That's kind of like someone who's anxious.
Right.
If it's too flabby, it's like you're in depression. Let's say your lung, colon, meridian is there's no energy to it. It's just the string is too loose. So this yin yang thing is very fascinating. Excessive deficient.
Right. And I mean the goal here is homeostasis, which is what Western medicine would call it. It would be balance, I suppose, in the Eastern kind of definition. And the main place to start with a lot of the disease and health problems, from what you're saying, sounds like kidneys, gut.
Kidneys, the whole organ systems, understanding their place. And I think, for me personally, and this is interesting, this goes pretty deep, because this is my contention. People who raised me were totally energetically imbalanced, never had a clue. And for years, that's all I knew was like, this is normal. So now you got to even work every day with the fact that was your habit, that you were trying to adapt to an abnormal energetic field, which you'll never do. The only way to heal is to start to honor the part within you that says, here is balance, here's where you need to go. And yes, maybe you're going to have to retune that guitar 1,000 times or go fix, some of this is genetics, whatever. if you were accustomed to attuning yourself, if somebody's watching this and you're 20 years old, you have a lot of trauma, start now. Start tuning that instrument inwardly now, and you'll be way better by the time you're 50. So it's a
Right.
question of when you start the practice of inner attunement and when you learn the skill set of it. Now, I have to do this sometimes 3 times a day because I started later in life. But at least I'm clued in, and you know, structurally I'm fine. You know, a lot of if I make a list, and by the way, this is how you know you're succeeding. Make a list of all your health issues, and if they start to heal, well, you still might have some distress, but so what? You know if the outer is healing, if all of a sudden for me it was like digestive tract, structural issues. I can go down the list. They're way better. Is there disturbance in the mind? Yes. Well, number one, this is Ho'oponopono too, because you go back to what you said. Where is the mind? If I'm tuning into the mind out there, or the global mind, or this field, yeah, it's disturbing. So who am I cleaning? What am I cleaning? In other words, if we're receiving all this energy, I would admire anybody who says, you know what, I'm in bliss. I don't care about all that outer disturbance. It's all bullshit. I'm in total bliss. I congratulate you.
Well, I think it's a two-way street. I mean, there's an exterior field that's your own, and then there's another field above that, but you can influence. It's not just one direction. It's two-way communication, I believe, anyways.
Well, what I'm trying to teach people
So
is how
I mean, that's why joy is contagious.
I guess I'm trying to teach people how to go inward. This is Ho'oponopono. Be mindful of what shows up in you and how to realign on a regular basis these imbalanced fields. That's just pragmatism. So if the anger shows up, here's how to deal with the anger. If the fear shows up, here's how to deal with the fear. If grief shows up, recently I had a precious dog that died, and I've been kind of grieving, and I forgot to do that. Here's a simple thing. Rectal ozone insufflation is amazing on the colon. And I finally did it after weeks yesterday. And my God, in the colon, if you have grief, it's like you're going like this in your gut, that ozone will help work with that grief. So if somebody just died, it sounds nuts. Gut brain, the gut is so huge. Rectal ozone insufflation will work on grief, not just toxins, not just cleaning the colon at it. Yes, it does that, but if the colon does this, the toxin's going to aggregate. You want a really breathing, vital field out here, a happy colon.
Yeah, so we've been, on the clinic side of our operation, ozone plays a big role. But for those that don't know what it is, could you explain what ozone therapy is?
Yeah, ozone therapy is, by the way, putting aside anything you go online, would you read, it's simply oxygen that's electrified, like lightning on oxygen. Okay, now if you feel good about oxygen and you feel good about lightning, that's nice. Don't make them the bad guys. So what happens when you apply lightning to oxygen? Well, first of all, the gas is extremely permeable. Now, if you strategically apply it to the body, this is, to use the lack of a better word, alchemy. I can give you all the outer language of all the benefits of ozone, because it is cleansing, obviously. It's used to clean up a bunch of toxins. But the alchemy, to start off with, is oxygen that you electrify that turns into ozone. So it's a very active, radical, catalytic gas. And when it goes in the body, it has a lot of known healing properties like antimicrobial, but it's an amazing catalyst, number one. So
it's very famous for, remember OxyClean?
Right. And they use it in, toxic cleanup is used a lot. And every hot tub has ozone. We know it's a cleaner, but I think personally, what's being not fully understood with ozone is, again, this goes back to the deep subconscious piece, is it's so, lightning itself, which is mission, by the way, too, has an incredible ability to break up these very deep patterns that have been we get habituated with. So it's almost like literally you're putting now this mini lightning field into the body, but oxygen's the carrier agent. So what are you really delivering? You're delivering, actually, I think that's why I'm fascinated with the action of lightning. What does lightning do? And so if you just breathe oxygen or infuse oxygen, you're not going to clean pathogens. So ozone, the lightning aspect does some wonders. So you could say, in a way, that oxygen's the carrier wave for the electrified field.
Yeah, so those that know a little bit about chemistry will know that ozone is O3. It's 3 molecules of oxygen, and it's quite unstable. It really wants to break off into O2. So you have this, and then a single molecule, or I guess you could say atom, of oxygen will want to interact with other things very badly. The natural state of oxygen is O2 in that configuration. Now, moving on from that, you keep bringing up mission. I have the device here, and I have actually been doing some research, and it's again like this technology is like 100, and it's 2024, 130 something years in the making.
It's mission developed, tweaked up a certain parameters around what's called a mission coil. So he's not the first person to do coil. Right. So this is an electrostatic field lightning. Let me just be very simple. I started doing body work, and I observed the power of lightning therapy in the meridian, breaking up chi stagnation, which is the blocked energy in the body. So you're trying to go subtle with it, very subtle within this dense field, and lighten up the field. And so I was using another technology called the e-power machine for years when I treated people. So, but the problem, okay, so these are like fine little nuances if you're into this. The e-power machine, you wore a belt, and it kind of just soaked in like a soaker hose. The mission coil is more like you get your garden hose out and turn on that aggressive spray, and
right, it's more direct.
It's not soaking, it's plowing aggressively. So here's the thing: it's electrostatic.
So,
but the frequency is 300,000 hertz, not 70,000 like that other device, and the mission coil spins and has a vortex to it, not a soaker, so you can actually target an area aggressively, like that garden hose when you turn on the aggressive spray. And that's key. A lot of these things are almost like, if it was physical, everyone would get it, like a jackhammer, let's say, versus a pick.
Right.
You're thinking about, how do I penetrate? It's just feel. So these are field tools, which have little nuances. And this is such a baby field, because if we figure all this out, we're trying to get a deep bond, these blockages in the energy body, which really don't give up. They just stay there and they stick. How many people have a bad knee or a bad this, and it's always bad. So, I just clued in bodywork to the microfield, and that's Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine is microfield medicine.
So when you say bodywork, you're not talking about a massage. This is something else.
No. When I got into bodywork, with little training, I started treating people, and I knew acupuncture meridians, like I say, they lit up like a Christmas tree. Same thing when I studied piano. I was being taught this and that and this, and I went home and started playing the blues. I just knew it.
Yes.
My piano teacher said, "Don't do it."
Yeah, I'm a pianist that really annoys the people that learned how to play piano, because it was a strange phenomenon for me. I could just play piano instantly. It was intuitive, and I've taught myself. I just knew what to do. I didn't have all the physical, skills necessarily right away, but I knew what to do. And, I think there's an analogous kind of feel thing. A lot of practitioners, really good ones, in my opinion, seem to be, they're intuiting. They're being intuitive. They're they're taking the feedback from the patient on an energetic level, and you can feel it. There's heat, you know, heat is energy, it's electrothermal, it's radiation, it's the and everyone in a sense has the ability to detect these things, but the way our society works with the ultra, you know, left brain is, as you kind of say, I think it's trying to hold us down or hold this away. So we have, you know, this kind of monster in the room that we got to whap out of the way and get back to our intuitiveness.
Well, the body is your temple. Go into the temple and observe and listen. If you can just listen to your body, you will heal. But how do you? I'm saying pick up.
Well,
the 12 string
if you're taught to be deaf,
exactly. If you pick up a 12-string guitar and never even think to put your hand and do this, you got to learn the moves. So what are the moves to enter the field? This is body work. Number ABC. The first thing I had to do every time I treated someone is get in. And then when I got in, the body speaks. So you have to learn to do this for yourself. How do you enter inward? How do you wake up the field and let it talk? That's number one. Now, once it starts talking, you want to probably get a gun and shoot yourself. So how do you not get a gun? And now how do you sort out all the chaos? And how do you respond to eons of insane data that's showing up? And by the way, again, listen. But in body work, this sounds probably a little crazy, but my best teaching is you're learning to play the blues on yourself. Your body is kind of like a bass or a guitar. The meridian points are like the notes that you lean. If you ever listen to, like, I hate to quote old blues guitarists, the original Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green, go listen to him. Now do that on yourself. So if you understood the blues, and why is the blues so primordially, it's like the essence of American culture comes out of the blues. What the hell is the blues? It's a cosmic language of musicality that works on the soul. So, okay, what is this thing called the soul? Well, the mind is really in a field of chaos, and it's permeating endless chaos. Now you want to go deeper to the soul level where the mind gets healed. So now you have to define soul. Well, you know, why? Tell me about Aretha Franklin. What the heck was so soulful about her? You got to learn to be a blues musician on your own body. Learn the musicality language, and you will start to make progress.
You know, it's interesting if you look at, you know, how, like, blues is essentially pentatonics, and then you have that extra note, that extra slidey area where you can really play with it. And in the context of that scale, there's so much emotion that comes out of that, just that one little section, that bend, that area.
Yeah, one little quick thing before you go on. In Rife technology, they call that the wobble.
Okay, so
and by the way, frequency, the attack, all these frequency therapies, they got like attack mode, staccato, attack, staccato. Wait a minute, legato frequency field, staccato frequency field. So now they're trying to hammer away at a stuck field with attack or distortion.
Mm-hmm.
Distortion on a guitar. Why distortion? So what are we going at?
Well,
Exactly.
I mean, distortion with guitar is an interesting, and healing, I guess you could say. Distortion really only works for me with guitars if they're using tube amplifiers, which gives warmth. So it's not this sharpness. You're getting overtones. So you're getting a thickness, not a sharpness, not a noise, but you're getting an overtone. And that really is only accomplished with old style tube-based amplifiers.
By the way, think a tube is soulful. More soulful alchemy.
Right.
How many people are using all these technologies and they get nowhere because it's mind? Something's missing in the alchemy in the soup that's not soul.
Well, if you look at the waveform, you can literally see on the digital distortions, which I personally don't like. If you like them, fine, you know, to each their own. But if you look at the waveforms, they have flat tops. They're literally cutting off a lot of the sound that's going on. And that's why a lot of people really prefer going back to those old 1940s style or earlier than that, you know, with the glass tube based amplifiers. So
By the
that's
way,
interesting.
is a plasma tube in a rifle machine equivalent to have some why they use it? Is there something living about the plasma?
It, right.
And
Yeah.
by the way, now let's go to the hydrogen and the ozone and the mission. Alchemy again. The closest thing, we're trying to bring in some kind of living, vibrational, alchemic, primordial stuff. I think mission is creating a plasmic, it's plasmic in that lightning is, if lightning is plasmic, is mission plasmic.
So, I mean, you know, we're going into with the mission coil, specifically this one. Like I have one right here. It's not just a frequency that's blasting an electrical field. There's a lot more going on. Like you said, there's a wobble wave, and it.
Well, if you're on square wave, there's more cut. It actually, this doesn't walk. It's not really a walk. Pretty locked in.
I
But
think
it's-
we're gonna want to do specific videos on each of these things, but I just wanted to get a like an overview of you know, the world of Andrew Scheim, and we are going to continue this series where we're going to explore in depth the what did you call it, the alchemy, how all of these things work together.
Well, I would like to briefly give a quick, it's good that we're going around on all the stuff, but I'd like to sort of give a quick summary bullet point piece to how I look at, you know, when I work with somebody really directly. Well, let me give you an example.
Okay.
Somebody calls me up, they have cancer, and I look at them and I go, this is not going to work if you don't deal with the trauma, but they're not going to deal with the trauma. And as sad as I feel about it, you know, usually that's the end of it. Now, on the other hand, I had somebody recently, and like, they had a lot of trauma in their life, and how do I deal with it? So this is the $1,000,000 question. I will say this. I mean, it's almost like the AA program. Until you're down on your knees and almost destroying your life, are you willing to, you know, what are you willing to do? And I'm not saying give it over to a higher power. It's very generic. So one of the things I'm fascinated in teaching, and I've seen this with cancer people, is how to self-commune with your own trauma. Simple steps. So number one, develop some simple somatic therapies that are naturally kind and gentle to allowing you to start to express trauma to yourself, self-intimacy, where you're bringing up all the chaos to yourself in a healing, loving, gentle way. That's a key part of the therapy. Number two, look at digestive health and toxicity, very critical. This is where ozone mission, all this stuff comes in. Have developed tools to address overall toxicity, start treating those key organs we talked about, and understand how you can do that. Another thing I see very often is, and this is very vital too, is the hormonal piece. If your hormonal system is very imbalanced, look at that. In other words, we assess digestion, toxicity, trauma. Look at this gets consequential because of some of this just age. Like for instance, I'm going to be 70. I take hormones because they deplete with aging, and it helps.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do assess sort of the ABCs. Digestion is huge. The gut immunity is huge. Toxicity overall. Of course, if you have imbalance in organ systems, treat them, but look underneath. And then trauma is huge. So the nervous system is part of trauma. What can you do to work on the nervous system? So it's not easy, but you make a checklist with every person and you start building in multiple therapies. And then you look at your checklist. Well, what's better? What's worse? And then you just start seeing improvement, hopefully, if you're doing different levels of work. But you just can't isolate. Most people want to isolate it to one thing or the other. And I think that's wishful thinking. And then they're hammering away at one thing and they're missing something else. So I call this 10-dimensional chess. There was an episode of Star Trek. You gotta kind of get outside yourself or find someone who can help you do that and, look multidimensional.
That's fundamentally one of the missions of iHeal Collective, is to change, or at least influence the paradigm into a more individualistic protocol. Whereas people walk in the door, they're going to say, I have yada yada, fancy word made up by monkey humans, whatever. But really, it's a specific situation specific to that person, which deserves like, if they actually want to recover and not just take pills and mask symptoms and then die anyway, it requires a deep, it requires a deeper investigatory intake, and understanding that it's not just the word that's in the book. There could be a lot of things going on. There's a mental aspect. There's a soul aspect. There's an energetic aspect, and then we're seeing the representation of the problem in the organ system or the pathology that we're observing.
Here's something interesting. Why I like the Chinese system is because there's something called pulse taking. And if you can listen to your pulse, it will get you more in tune with, oh, wait a minute, I need to focus here. Now, I'm not telling you you're going to have every watt figured out, but at least you're actually getting brought into the, okay, let's say it's just, you're out of balance emotionally. Is it grief? Is it anger? Is it a mix of everything? But you're actually listening to the energetic body, and that very active listening, very helpful. I mean, if you could do profound attunement, you're going to go very far with all the other issues, depending on your age. I still would contend, I don't think I could grow back a healthy thyroid, but who knows? Anything's possible. So it is important to just, I guess the message of this first interview is learn to listen to yourself, and then learn, okay, how do you listen here? People would say, that's fine and dandy, but how do I do that? If you're screaming at yourself all the time, then wait a minute. Well, I'm listening. If your wife is screaming at you, you're listening. But who's screaming at her?
Yeah. Right.
And by the way, now, this is very important in relationships. Can you observe your partner's energy field without ignore the words and actually just listen to their energy and then see what it does to your energy? That's a huge undertaking right there. Because we're all imbalanced. So if somebody's being extroverted with their imbalance and you're being introverted, it's still imbalance. So how to even, if you take an extroverted, imbalanced person, learn to go inward and then say, thank you for giving me this gift to start to listen to my imbalance. Because you're like, be balanced. It's like,
yeah.
Good luck. So you go inward and you just thank them for the gift of what they're revealing in your imbalance. Because it's all like you say, it's all this bullshit in distortions in the consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, if you leave a guitar out in the sun and the humidity and it warps, you're gonna have to tune that. You're gonna have to tune that mother several times over the course of days, even for it to hold again. And as a as an analog to healing, it's not a light switch.
I'll give a very concrete example. This morning, it's always 90% of the time you're projecting. So if someone outside of you is acting a certain way, I guarantee you, find it within yourself. And by the way, if you think you're holier than thou, well, let's just think of a time when you weren't. So it might be karmic, but one way or the other, that imbalanced field has been in you. It's an opportunity always there's never an end to trying to achieve inner balance. And the other side of the coin though becomes a perfectionist thing. Like if you're this I tend to do to myself. If I'm out of balance, judging it. No, but the Ho'oponopono would say, "Thank you for showing up." That's their operative first word. So when the imbalance shows up, you say, "Thank you for this opportunity," so to speak, to kind of look at this, work with this. So our tendency is to judge the imbalance, especially dudes, right?
Yes, guys are classically ignorant of this stuff. I even have trouble addressing it, I'm in a health collective, and I'm learning new things every day. Andrew,
Well, also, we're the lab rats of women because they know how to play. They know how to play us. Not all women. A lot. My wife's pretty clean. But a lot of women, they'll see your imbalance and they'll, first thing, of course, I grew up with is the judgment. I know better than everybody else. Growing up, if you learn how to manipulate people and get away with it, then, you got an upper hand, right?
Yeah, and it's female nature to suss out the strength in the men that they're around, because if you go back, ancient times, men being strong was the difference between living or dying. Like it absolutely mattered more than almost anything else, is the ability of a man to protect his tribe and family. And so it's the women need to determine that the man has the strength to do that, even though we're not in the Stone Age anymore and we're not being hunted by lions. That evolutionary holdover is very much there, and something that we should understand and know that it is sometimes difficult to handle. That it's something that is built in to keep you at the top of your game.
I used to say the purpose of body work was to regain your power, but the problem is you lost your power because of lies, bullshit, distortion. In other words, lack of spiritual integrity. So if you're going to regain your power, what does that look like actually? So this gets very interesting because, it's we're spiritual beings, I really do believe. So you better redefine power spiritually. And by the way, that's Chinese medicine, because the energy body just doesn't lie. So yeah, you want to be, well, go check your energy body. You want to be a punk rock guitar player, bang heads? Well, okay, I ain't going to that concert. If you call that power. It's also very interesting. Miles Davis was a Gemini, and he had some of the most incredible music at the beginning of his career, but then it's like, fuck that, I ain't playing that shit anymore. I'm all going to play new stuff. But that was so own-based. It was so precious. But he couldn't sit still with, like, I'm going to stay in my innocence. I mean, I know it sounds crazy. I got to be innovative. That's mental. He was a Gemini. He was always restless. So keep in mind that essence is essence. So, if you can really hone in on that essence, that will take you very far down the road. And what does real power look like? And, do you want to be a punk rock or a Buddhist?
Yeah, and you can be a combination of both, I think. Punk rock is all about the drums. That's the fireplace, sunset party, clap your hands, jump around. And then you have the home is the sunrise.
It's sexually compatible if you're 20.
Sure, yeah. It's a young person thing, 100%.
What happens if you see, it's funny because I don't handle conflict the way I did when I was younger, and the way I handled it when I was younger wasn't very effective. So, I'm just saying one thing over and over. If you learn to listen to your body, you're going to get the greatest attunement of all, because the wisdom it's going to take you to is just beyond anything you can even comprehend. So the body is the gateway to the soul. As far as, a lot of people negate the body, but I think it's the gateway to the soul, because you go through the subconscious mind, and then you got to get, from there you get the soul. Because the subconscious mind is saying, wait a minute, this is crazy, once you see it. But once you recognize the insanity of the subconscious, well, what's recognizing it? How would you even know it's insane? Right. That's a huge question I have. What's recognizing that this is out of balance? And it's so obvious. There's a beingness to you that knows right off the bat. But then there's this field of subconscious distortion that keeps raising its head. The empowered yogi just has tuned into the field of beingness so strongly that the mind's on the very deep backdrop.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of philosophy. It's very interesting. Andrew,
The
I'd like to have
body
you.
is the body has the informational wisdom if you learn
Yes.
to listen to it. Now, maybe I'm being crazy and say, look, depends on the type of body work you are. The Ho'oponopono were about soul consciousness body work.
So I'd like to talk about hydrogen therapy, the mission coil, and we're not gonna have time today because I'm out of time. I have to go, but we're gonna come back to those things, and we're gonna talk about how you can incorporate these devices and modalities in your day-to-day life, and really give yourself a head start energetically, and perhaps even I know that you work with some people in pretty rough shape. So
Yeah.
we can discuss that and go through some of the different therapies that you like to use and combinations of them and the subtleties of them and how to do it properly for best results. Andrew is in New Mexico. Are you in Albuquerque or around there?
Yes, Albuquerque.
I'm gonna put his information below. So if you want to reach out to Andrew, you are still practicing, or is it a C? Are you hiding?
Well,
or-
mostly it's my mission statement is I teach you to assemble a home clinic, we assess, and then you go to work. So that's most of the people I work with they have to want to work on themselves.
Excellent. So
Occasionally, if you're doing that and you need a boost with some good high-level body work, occasionally I might jump in and do some of that. But I'm very reluctant unless you're really 90%. It's 90% you participating and 10% me going, okay, maybe I'll jump in here.
right. So very much a practitioner's practitioner. If you're getting into the healing field and you're young and bright-eyed, Andrew is a fantastic resource. So don't hesitate to reach out to him. Andrew, thanks for coming on. We're gonna have you back soon. We're gonna talk more about this guy. This is the Mission Coil, 125 years in the making. And this device comes from Russia. I've been using it and I'm really enjoying it. And there's all sorts of different things that you can do with it that are a lot of fun, and you can combine it with hydrogen therapy, and we may be scratching the surface of some pretty incredible advancement in the energy healing field. So
No, this will be exciting because these are technologies that can save your life. And once you learn the basics about them and then how to integrate them, and this is really not very difficult. It's literally child's play at the level. They're innocent, they're beautiful. Just understand their dynamics and you'll have a huge leap in your healing.